Now recording. So, there's been a room change. We're here now. Yeah, when they change a room, this is generally a permanent change. It's okay. I like this room better, so this is a better room.
Is that in writing any place?
It will be eventually, I'm sure. I can look it up in the system. It's just like my laptop wasn't connecting to the Wi-Fi, and someone else looked it up first, and like your timetable thing should reflect the change.
On the My Mohawk.
On my Mohawk, yeah. Because
They
that's
just don't tell you to look there ahead of time.
yeah, they don't see. Yeah, it's what it is it's change without notice and notice without change. That's the system. So it's okay. I prefer a long room to a wide room because it has better acoustic properties. You can hear me in the back better today, right? Yeah. So yeah. Well, we only lost 8 minutes to that nonsense.
That's a lot.
I mean,
That's like how much time is wasted ever by the Windows and these
if everybody could please fire up Mohawk apps, fire up XAMPP and VS Code, because we're going to do some more code examples today. Game Dev Club. Come to the Game Dev Club, please. Everybody should come. Friday, 2, 4, indeed, 121, assuming there hasn't been another room change. There we go. All right. So, yeah, if I were you guys, I would check the rest of your schedule for changes. Changes sometimes occur in just one class, but sometimes in multiple classes. So, let's take a look at our material for today. I think this is like the third time I've had to log in to something to teach a class. Like you'd think if you logged in with credentials into an account, you know, you wouldn't have to enter those twice more in a browser.
How do they know it's really you though?
Well, I mean, the question is how do they know it's not me with? How do they know it's not someone else with my username and password?
Because people would never do that.
Yeah, certainly. If there's one thing about people, it's that they're all completely honest.
So that's why I can trust everything I see on my Twitter feed.
Exactly. And that's why no website would ever lie to you. And
True.
ChatGPT always tells the truth.
Would someone really do
You
that?
can't get me there. That will always lie.
Actually, on the subject of the accursed chatbot, I was watching a computer file video about like generative AI and like whether it's actually going to do what some people think it's going to do, which is to continue to explode in its usefulness. Usefulness here, like being described as like how finite, like is it ever going to be capable of doing things outside of its training data, right? Because at the moment, believe it or not, it really doesn't do much outside of the data that it was trained on, right? In order to get something like general artificial intelligence, you would have to be able to get it to respond correctly to novel situations, which it currently doesn't do, right? So it's interesting because how specific it can be about something is proportional to the amount of times that something appears in its training data. The more specific something is, the less frequently it occurs in training data. So it's actually, it seems like, according to a paper that was published recently, people thought that like, if this is like goodness of response, and this is size of training data, what people thought was going to happen, people who were optimistic about AI, they thought that it was going to go like this, and that the goodness of the response would sort of be exponential on the amount of data that you fed in it. You just had to get over like some initial threshold and then it would take off. People who were perhaps a bit more circumspect about AI was like, well, you know, maybe you have something like this going on, where you have like a linear relationship between how good the response is and how much data do you feed in. But you then also have the pessimistic view, which is something like this. That is to say, in this initial phase, the difference between like, you know, 1 billion points of data and 2 billion points of data is that you get a modest increase. You get a pretty good increase. You like double its effectiveness here. But out here, going from like, you know, 300 billion to 301 billion gets you almost nothing in terms of improvement. And it seems, fingers crossed, it seems like mathematically the pessimistic case is beginning to be like demonstrated. So it seems like the law of diminishing returns also applies to the size of the data set that you train an AI model with, which kind of makes sense if you think about it. Most things in life have diminishing returns. So given that data collection is the most expensive part of putting together these large models, because we're talking about truly ludicrous amounts of data, like the idea that we then have to double that amount of data again to get like a 1% increase in the quality of the responses, like at a certain point it's just not going to be like economically feasible to do so, and it's just going to be like, well, it's gotten so good, that's good enough. We can't really afford to improve it because we're getting much more incremental increases based on how much money we pour into this giant gaping hole. So, that seems to be the situation that we're in with artificial intelligence. So, I don't think that it's going to, replace human beings anytime soon. Which is nice if you're a human being, right?
My opinion is that it'll replace people when customers know exactly what specifications they want. So never.
Precisely. Well, See, there's this interesting short story by Isaac Asimov. Is anybody aware of Isaac Asimov? Hands up if you know Isaac Asimov.
Didn't you talk about this story last time? I think I maybe remember it.
Yeah.
Oh,
So
it was after class.
yeah, it was after class.
Okay, never mind.
So Isaac Asimov is one of the most important science fiction authors of the 20th century. You know, the only decade really that had science fiction, except maybe for the previous one a little bit. It's like Asimov and Clarke, and those are like the two really major science fiction authors. So if you're going to read any science fiction at all, it should be one of those two guys. But he wrote a short story at one point where computers got so good, that you didn't really have to program them anymore. You had a very small number of people who were very highly trained in asking the right question. Right? And that seems to be like what the trend is on this AI stuff. But yeah, so there is hope. We're not going to all be replaced by computer versions. We're not going to be replaced by robot versions of ourselves, like in Invasion of the Body Snatchers, but with robots this time. Invasion of the Body Snatchers, that's another classic movie. So
if robots take over, I want it to be like Terminator 2, not like oh, now everyone loses their jobs. Like, that's boring.
It is. It's like, if you're gonna make robots to take over the world, like, the human beings that are already in the world is like the least inventive way to do that. You know? Although it's really good for like existential horror. Anyway, so we should talk about PHP and stuff. Okay. So, there we go. So let's begin today's class with a quick review of the difference. I think I'm going to adjust the. If I'm going to be standing mostly over there, that should be in camera. There we go. Good. So let us begin our class today with a quick review of the difference between single quotes and double quotes in PHP. Can anybody remind me what the difference is? Yes?
They let you do the inline variables?
They let you do the inline variables. Which ones?
The single quotes. Or did I mess it up?
No.
Double quotes?
You had a 50% chance, and unfortunately, yeah.
Damn.
So yes. So the single quotes and the double quotes, the difference is double quotes are interpreted strings. Single quotes are uninterpreted strings. So if we have a variable contained within double quotes, PHP will go out into its database, find the value for the variable, substitute it into the string, and move on with its life, i.e. continue execution. With a single quotes string, that is literally the characters represented. So it does not identify this as being a variable. It does not go and seek further data. It says, nope, that's not a variable. That's a $, and that's an X. And that's all she wrote. So, the question that we now have to ask ourselves is, how does PHP decide what is variable name and what is not? Incidentally, we should probably go and see if there's anybody at the other door because the room changed. Would you mind going, just checking quickly? Thank you so much. So let's consider the following examples. Let's open up our htdocs folder as per the usual. Okay, cool. Thank you for checking. New folder. Week 3. There we go. Select folder. Bing, bang, boom. Increase magnification. Here. Increase magnification. Make a new file. Call it examples. .php. There we go. We can pull that open in localhost. Like so, localhost 1080. If you're on your own laptop, mileage may vary with that. Week 3/example.php. Oh, I probably just didn't run, my Apache server and started. Start your Apache server and then do everything else. There we go. Not found, huh?
It's examples.
Examples, with an S, yes, thank you. There we go, blank page, question it back.
Is it unusual I never have to start my Apache server? It always is already running. Like, I've never had to start it.
Yeah, that is weird. Apache is already running by default every time you try it?
Every time I open it, the options are stop for Apache and stop for MySQL.
Very strange. I don't know. That's weird. I guess you just, like, that must be a passive buff for you. Is like, just because it's you, because like it's a lab computer.
Oh, no.
Oh, you're on a route? Oh, never mind. Yeah, okay. It's been pre-configured to do it that way. Yeah. So, let's say we wanted to echo the following in PHP. I have memory, gigabytes of RAM. Better go download more. And let's say memory is the value 16. If we execute this, we get, I have 16 gigabytes of RAM, better go download more. Alright, so far so good. But this is grammatically incorrect in English. Can anybody spot the grammatical error in English? Yes?
The dollar sign number.
No, in the printed text.
Should be gigabytes.
Sorry, what?
Yeah, no.
The dot? No, that's a period. That is a sentence. This might be an incomplete sentence, but that's not what I'm talking about. Yes?
The gigabyte being away from 16.
That's it. There is a space here, whereas technically speaking, there should be no space there. So, here's a question. What if we just remove the space? Our editor gives us a hint about what the problem with that is.
Oh, yeah, I get it.
Undefined variable, memory GB. So, the way that PHP, let me finish my sentence. The way that PHP is deciding what is variable and what is not variable is by watching for non-variable allowable characters. Pardon me. So, some characters are legal in variable names, other characters are not legal in variable names. If you encounter a character that is not legal in a variable name, that stops the variable name. Space is a character that's not legal in a variable name. Thank goodness. Because there's no space here, it's like, oh, this whole thing is variable name.
Well, I have a different option for this.
So, you had a question.
No, I was just talking about a solution, but
Oh, the solution? Well, what's your proposed solution?
Well, at first I was gonna say wrap the GB in single quotes, but then that doesn't work because then the double quotes will read it, single quote. Then I just put GB as its own variable and just set it equal to GB. And then I did dollar sign GB.
Yeah, you could do it that way. Yes.
I mean, this is probably really lazy, but I'd just append the letters G and B to the end of the memory string after it's.
Yeah, you could do that as well. You could split the string and then concatenate. It's true. That definitely does split the variable name.
Oh, it's gonna be download.
But there's a better, different technique that I must show you contractually. So here you go. Those are creative solutions, though. So, in an interpreted string, variable names are not the only thing which is interpreted. Another thing which is interpreted is curly braces. If we wrap our variable in curly braces, save, reload, da-da-da-da-dum, we get what we want. And we don't have to break up the string. I guess this is my elbow printer now. So, this is good. It turns out that using these, you can do a few other fancier things like indexing arrays and getting properties out of objects and that sort of thing as well. Question?
This is off the last class, yeah. But you said last class that people can insert language code using, like, if they do an input, right? So I was thinking, is there a way to force an input to be single quotes so it doesn't interpret it as variables?
Force an input to be single quotes. Oh,
yeah, so like if they wanted to put in a variable name, they couldn't do that. Like it would just do the straight character.
well, it's highly, highly unlikely that if someone was trying to hack you
Yeah.
and they were trying to do a code injection attack, it's highly unlikely they'd be able to guess your variable names in PHP, right? Remember that none of the PHP whatsoever will be transferred to the client. It's secret, it can't be seen. So, I mean, you can guess that certain common variable names are probably being used, like I and J for things that involve loops, right? That sort of thing. It's also a fairly common convention to use like the same name as the parameter in the input packet. You use that same name as the variable name in PHP. That's fairly common as well. But I don't think, that's an interesting question actually. I don't think it would actually work. Let's try it. Well, we can't really try it until we get input.
Yeah, we don't have input. That was just something I was
But-
thinking about. Kind of bouncing off the
Yeah.
double.
But here's a question. If it's an uninterpreted string, but we place it inside of an interpreted string, will it interpret the thing that's uninterpreted?
No.
No, it does not.
Okay.
So it seems like it will only interpret things to one level anyway. So, oh, it will, because if you put double quotes, it will interpret X here. This will become the memory, the string will become just 10, right, because it'll do the substitution. And then it'll do this substitution again, so you will get the 10 out that way.
Could we do it without the quotes as well?
Without the quotes? Yes, but now memory is an integer.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. Any other questions? These are great questions. Okay. So, good. Moving right along. Let us now consider control structures in PHP. So, the overall point of these opening weeks of the class is to teach you all of the various ways that PHP is cursed. Alright? We are about to delve into levels of cursedness that we have not yet seen.
Oh boy.
Some of this stuff is pretty wild. I just want everybody to go in with the moral. You should program it like it's Java. Where you have an option between two different ways to do things, pick the Java way of doing things. Pick the Java way of doing things because the Java way of doing things is not cursed, and the other way of doing things is usually cursed. Sometimes it's badly cursed, as we shall see. So, Boolean expressions. They say, oh, what could be so bad about Boolean expressions? Oh.
Okay.
So, oh, it gets better.
No.
Casual inspection of this table might lead you to believe that you have the option in PHP between Python style using the word for the operation, for logical operations, and Java style / C style using the operator, the mathematical operators, please, or the symbol operators, however you want to say it. Well, you do and you don't. These actually function very differently. They mean different things in PHP. This one is lovely, this one is cursed. Let me show you how. But we have to understand a concept called operator precedence. So, hopefully everybody remembers bedness from elementary school, right? If I have an expression like 8 plus 4 times 6, what gets executed first? The multiplication first, then the addition. As multiplication has higher operator precedence. So, most logic operations have relatively low operator precedence. Even comparison operations will have lower precedence. So I can say something like 10 is less than 8 and, oh, sorry, leaving out the brackets, getting ahead of myself, and 3 is greater than or equal to 3, right? It doesn't perform, oh, sorry, 2 ampersands. It doesn't perform 8 and 3 first, right? It performs the comparison operations first. Is 10 less than 8? False. Is 3 greater than or equal to 3?
True.
True. False and true is? There we go. The calculation is performed. The problem with and or as written as English words in PHP is that they bind so loosely, they bind less loosely than assignment. Consider the following. X is equal to 10 is less than 8, and 3 is greater than or equal to 3. binds less tightly than assignment. So this is performed first. Well, actually, technically, these are performed first, if you want to get right down technical. So we insert our false and our true. And you know what, I'm gonna change this for or, just because it makes the example a little bit more interesting. They both work the same. So, x is equal to false or true. If this were normal or, what would we be assigning to x?
False.
True. If we were performing this first, x would be getting true. But because or binds least tightly on anything at all, x gets the value of false. What's the return result of an assignment operation? We went over this a couple of times last time, over the last couple of classes.
0 or 1.
Technically yes, but assignment in general returns the value that was written into memory as its return result. So if I say x is equal to 10, the return result of x as assigned to 10 is 10. So the return result of this is false. False or true, which then evaluates to true. But true here is not being assigned to any state. The value is generated and then lost. So you have a situation where if you think, oh, I can just do it like it's Python, and you put the or in, the thing that you thought was going to be true ends up being false. You get the opposite of what you intended. So, is that or is that not cursed? Fairly cursed, I would say. So, in terms of like actual cases where you would want to use that, I can't think of any. And I've been doing this for longer than most of you have. So just don't use them. Just don't use it. Easiest, simplest option, don't write cursed PHP. Just write normal, lovely operators. Don't use Python. And like, it's kind of perfect for me personally because like the cursed PHP operator comes from Python, you know, because Python's also a cursed language. So, does that make sense? To some extent? Any questions about that? All right.
Why do we let people write languages like this?
This is what you get when a language is written with almost no oversight, actually. So PHP is a language that's, like, in its origin, strongly collaborative. And basically the way it was developed is anybody who wanted to see something in the language just kind of put it in. So that's why PHP is this hodgepodge of weird and conflicting semantics, and there's 5 different functions that do any particular thing all the time. So that's PHP. I just want to point out though, as I am denigrating PHP for being cursed, I am not saying that any other language is any less cursed. They're all cursed. All programming is cursed. You have a question?
In the spirit of cursed academia, is this the case of you'll never use it, but it's going to be on the test?
No, I'm not going to put this on the test. That would be cruel. I'm not saying that there's not going to be anything from this on the test, though. There are some pieces that are
Cursed.
well, they're cursed, but it's like more impactful. So, you know, yes.
So are you saying that we never do or and?
Yeah, just don't use them.
Just
Or
don't use
if we,
Understand that the language supports them, but rise above it. Don't sink to PHP's level. Yes?
if I only put a exclamation mark in the first statement,
Like this?
no, in the first, then, what does that make? In the first.
Oh, here?
Yeah,
Right there?
yeah.
Yeah, then this would be true,
Yeah.
which means that would be true. But you still have this problem, right? Like you might get the same output, but the algorithm is still completely buggered. So, alright. There we go. Short circuit evaluation we already talked about. Okay. Now let's talk about cursed if statements. Okay, so let us review. If statements in Python. In Python, we have if, elif, else. I don't know about you, but whenever I see elif, my brain kind of abbreviates it to elf. You know? So it's like if, elf, else, which just I hate you, Python. Then we have Java, which is lovely and not cursed. If, else if, else. Words that are different words are also different words in Java. Okay. Does anybody care to guess what they do in PHP? Anybody already know? How many people think it follows Python? How many people think it follows Java? How many people think it's doing some other thing? You're right! You last folk are right! Here we go!
Oh, wow.
So it's if, else if, or else safe, yeah, else. Else if. So PHP, there's no space here, except it also supports the Java way of doing it.
Why?
Thank goodness. Yeah, why? Excellent question. Moving on. Yeah, so this is, again, this is what I mean. This is the second time this has come up. If you program it like it's Java, everything is lovely and good. If you program PHP like it's PHP, you know, like it'll work.
Is there a functional difference? Between,
No.
Like, so I'm just like, so some guy just thought it would be funny to put that in, like.
I think that what's actually technically happening, the reason that it supports both, is like, in this case, it like at the compiler level says, okay, this is an else if case.
Yeah.
Whereas here it's like, this is a general else case with a one-line statement afterwards that happens to be an if statement.
Oh.
Which, functionally speaking, there's no difference there,
Okay.
right? But at a compiler level, this might be like slightly less efficient, except I don't even believe that because like this kind of stuff gets all crunched down to go-tos at the CPU level anyway, so yeah, pardon me. So yeah, once again, just program your PHP like it's Java, and that works, and it's better. So if you do this, all right, I want you to envision, all right, I want you to envision yourselves in the future. I want you to envision yourself as a senior developer at some company, all right? Think about it, place that image in your mind, all right? Now, imagine that a junior dev comes up to you, all right? The junior dev is picking through your PHP code, trying to read it to understand it, right? And they say, but Mr. Senior Developer, sir, I noticed didn't write that code, because you'll have been well trained by me not to do that, right? If you use this style, then you never have to have that conversation, and everybody's happier. All right? Because the code will just look like code instead of looking like PHP. So, I'm being a little mean to PHP, but come on, it deserves it, just a little. So, all right, now let's talk about cursed ternary statements. So, we all remember ternary statements, hopefully. We had a couple of examples of these in previous classes where we were printing. Oh, we should probably tell these people, is it time? We should tell these people that there have been room changes. That would be the kind thing to do. No, I got it. See? That's how you're a good citizen. That's how you're nice to people. You tell people things. Alright. So, cursed ternary statements. So, ternary statements exist in many, many languages, not the least of which C and Java. In languages which have good, strong, static typing, the two output values of a ternary statement, expression 2 and expression 3, must be the same type. In order to satisfy the type checker that this expression always returns the same type and that type fits into the slot that's been given to it, those two have to agree, right? In dynamic languages, these two expressions do not have to agree on their types because nothing has to agree on their types because of weak, poor, bad typing. So, not only that, in PHP, you can omit some of these expressions and PHP will substitute in truth literals. So, again, this is different from how everybody else uses it. If you really, really, really need that, okay, but again, it just makes a whole lot of sense to do things the way that everybody else does them so that you have fewer problems in the future. Basically, you should be aware of these rules because you will have to read code that possibly uses these rules, but the more of these particular, weird little cursed rules that you include in your code, the less maintainable and readable your code is, right? Java is the gold standard for readable, maintainable code because everything it does is on paper, right? Don't get me wrong, it's a verbose language, it takes a lot of characters to do anything. I like to say of Java that it's a bit like old Entish. Any Lord of the Rings fans in here? No? Not one? Come on, there we go at the back.
Sorry, sir. I watched them when I was young and I didn't get them.
Oh my goodness. Oh, you just tore a piece out of my soul and ate it in front of me. That's how bad. Go watch The Lord of the Rings.
Okay.
What are you even doing here?
I don't know. The school told me to.
Yeah.
Computer science.
That's okay. For the next 3 classes, we're going to watch the Lord of the Rings trilogies. Actually, I think more like 4 or 5 classes. No, I'm kidding. Anyway, so in the Lord of the Rings, there is a group of tree people, and they have a language which is very old, and they say in their language that there's a line where it takes a very long time to say anything in Old Entish, but we don't say anything unless it's worth taking a very long time to say. And that's basically Java summarized. So, all right, let's talk about cursed switch statements. I guess they haven't found their new room, have they? Oh my goodness. All right, you know what?
Don't have fun with it.
I'm just going to double check that we actually have the room, okay? Because I'm going to check the database. And I'm not showing you the database.
Show me the PHP.
Where are we, 110 now?
Yes,
Yeah.
That's updated on my own timetable.
it's on your timetable, yes, but I'm just going to check it on mine, which is like, I don't know. It's like the source from which yours was generated. You know, in theory yours is correct, but I'm just going to check. Because, you know, like,
It's Wednesday today, by the way.
thank you. No, wait, it's not Wednesday today.
It's too.
Nice try. Let's see here. Course info, timetable. Current term, instructor, my number. Hold on. Execute report. Let's see here. Yep, it's in my schedule. Correctly. Okay. We have the room for another hour, because it is currently almost 2 o'clock and we have the room until 3.
They all left.
Eh?
They all left.
They all left? They got the message! Yay! Okay. It will be kind, though, to periodically tell people that there's been a room change out there. All right. Where was I? Switch statements. Yes. Not just any switch statements. Cursed switch statements. That's right. Switch statements are cursed in PHP as well. Would anybody care to? I'm assuming everybody is good with switch statements, right? You saw them in Java enough. Would anybody care to guess the particular manner in which switch statements are cursed in PHP? Yes.
Is it the lack of absolute comparison? Like a same data type, same value?
Precisely so. Actually, yes. And it's not that PHP lacks strict comparison, right? It just defaults to weak comparison, right? So, you can get into situations like this. There's been a room change, actually. Yeah. Sorry, I don't know where you're supposed to be going, but it's not here. We have another hour, so. All right. So let's say we switch some variable x, case 0, case false, case null, for example, which you may be tempted to do, as doing something like this actually would save you some lines of code versus doing a great big if-else or else save, you know, in PHP. But switch statements in PHP are cursed because they are using non-strict equality to compare x to the things. So, let's say, just for the sake of example, x is, in this case, null. how does a switch case work? Well, it calculates whatever this is, finds the value of the expression, then it goes through the cases, one at a time, comparing the listed literal to the value of the expression, and stopping at the first one it finds. Very similar to an if statement. So, if x is null, it examines case 0. Case 0, the 0 equates to null under non-strict equality, meaning that you execute this case and not that case. Because if you were expecting things to work the way they would work in a normal language, you'll be disappointed. Of course, in a language like Java, you wouldn't be able to mix data types like this anyways. So, does that make sense? Any questions? So this is an example of a curse that cannot be lifted by just writing it like it was Java, unfortunately. So let's talk about loops. For loops in PHP do not really need to be talked about very much. They operate the same way as for loops in Java and JavaScript. The only difference is you do not need to declare a type for the variable or use let or var. You just use the variable because that's what PHP does. Aside from that, the semantics are precisely the same. Make sense?
Yep.
So far, so good?
Yep.
We actually, there's been a room change, actually. We have the room for another hour. Yeah. Sorry, I don't know where your class is, but unfortunately it's not here. So, while loops then. I wonder how many people will get who are like late to that other class, eh?
I heard someone say that the note on the door has been there for a while.
The note on the door has been there for a while?
Someone said that.
Oh, so that note on the door is not actually accurate to the current changes? See, that's why I claimed ignorance. Because, you know, I didn't read the note carefully enough. I don't know what their class is. I'm not going to go out on a limb. It could be for an entirely different day. Who knows? Go check your schedule. That's the real answer. So, while loops then. Of course, while loops are the most fundamental type of loop that you have. There's essentially no difference between while loops here versus the while loops anywhere else. However, I would like to take this opportunity to hammer on a general stylistic point. Some of you may be in the habit with while loops of setting them up as infinite loops using a condition like while true, and then breaking out of them when you feel it's appropriate to do so, using an if statement inside of the loop or something like that. Technically speaking, this is bad form. It's not the worst thing it's not the worst thing you'll see, but it's not considered good practice. The purpose of the whiles condition is not just to guard the loop, it's also to be the spot where you see how the loop executes. If you've got a bunch of break statements sort of strewn about in lots and lots of code, all of us, I'm speaking to you specifically, no. All of us know how big these things can get, right? You can cram quite a lot into any one of these things. if you're breaking at random points inside like 100 lines of code, how that loop actually is supposed to work is not necessarily clear to someone who's trying to use it, or trying to maintain it, or trying to understand what it's doing, anything like that. Most of the time, when you're doing that, you're only doing that for your own mental convenience anyways, right? It's not that you couldn't formulate it with a condition that makes sense. It's that you're choosing not to because it makes more sense to you to do it this way, right? Again, not the worst thing in the world. Fundamentally, it's most important that the program actually works. But it makes your code less maintainable, harder to document, all of these types of things. Any questions? All right. Anybody remember do-while loops? Remember in Java how you covered those for, approximately 30 seconds
Yeah.
and never used them again in your life?
I couldn't tell you what they do, but I know what they do.
Moving on.
Good.
It's just a loop where you test the condition at the end of the loop rather than at the beginning of the loop. So, if you're not here for server-side programming, you're in the wrong class. There's been a room change.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, sorry. So, one late student. For each loops. Now, this should surprise you that of the languages we have talked about, Python, Java, JavaScript, and PHP, in the personal and humble opinion, perhaps not so humble opinion, of your professor, PHP actually has the least cursed implementation of for loops. So, let's consider the Python for loop, right? Python for loops are actually for each loops. Everybody else knows that it's a for each loop. Python pretends that a for loop is actually a for each loop because there's this weird design decision that they made with Python that you shouldn't have multiple control constructs that do the same thing. This is the reason that for a very long time Python didn't support switch statements. Because why would you need a switch statement? You have an else if, or elif, if elif, which is of course stupid. Switch statements have their purpose. There are things you can do with a switch statement that you can't do with an if statement. If you allow execution to fall through multiple cases by not including a break at the end of each one of them, that's something you can't do with if statements. Or at least not easily. They recently added switch statements, but they goofed them up in some manner that I never cared to learn. Basically, I was done with Python when I learned that it does while else. And I'm like,
Sorry?
yeah, while else.
While else.
While else.
What?
My confusion and yours are the same confusion. Yeah, why would they do that? Yeah. You think I'm making it up? I'm not making it up.
What does that mean?
While else in Python.
Doesn't that let you
You're a jerk.
run something
No.
off and it'll be accident?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Behold the while else in Python.
Oh my god.
Oh my god.
Now I ask you a question. The purpose of the else case on the while loop is to execute when the loop condition is no longer true. Now I ask you, what happens when the loop condition is no longer true on a while loop?
Exit.
It exits. It just executes here anyways. Why have an else case? If you took that out and unindented it, it would be the same thing. Except maybe for variable scopes. But actually, I don't think, no, because Python doesn't even do block level scoping. I don't think it does. I could be wrong. No, I'm pretty sure I'm right. Talking about, see what I mean? Every programming language is cursed. It just depends on where. What is cursed about every language? There's only one language that is not cursed, and that is C. Or possibly also Greenbird.
What about assembly?
How about Java?
Java, as we're about to see, I consider for each loops in Java to be cursed. Have I shown you guys Dreambird in this class, in this section? No? You want a brief digression? Dreambird programming language. So, this is Dreambird. This is the perfect programming language. Here are its features. This is a joke, by the way. So, instead of semicolons, it uses exclamation points because it adds emphasis. You can use as many as you want. You can also add a question mark if you're unsure. So the question is, if it's using exclamation points for semicolons, what does it use for like the not operator? It uses semicolon.
Oh my god.
This is evil.
Yeah. Oh wait, it gets better. So there are 4 types of variable declarations. All right. You have constant constants,
What?
constant variables, variable constants,
Oh,
and variable variables. Yeah. I could go on, but we should get back to class.
That is evil.
It's a joke. Although, it's a joke with a compiler, and you can actually write programs in it.
Have
Yes.
you ever heard of vanilla JavaScript?
Vanilla JavaScript?
Wait, just search it up. It's a 10-second thing. I swear it'll be super
This
fast.
is safe for work,
it's,
right?
It's yeah.
Yeah.
Just go to the second link. The second link. Vanilla
This
JS.
one?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Honestly, you can read through it your own time, but it's a huge joke. It's like.
Maintains every byte of code in the framework and works hard each day to make sure it is small and intuitive.
It's literally just JavaScript. Like they made a whole framework for just JavaScript, and they called it vanilla JavaScript.
Oh, it's a framework, but all it is just JavaScript. Oh, I get it. Okay.
They were just making fun of people who just keep making frameworks for no reason, and they
Gotcha.
they just made one called vanilla JavaScript.
Hilarious. Okay. Yep.
It's just like real JavaScript.
It's just been, yeah, okay. But it's a framework. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
It's a huge joke for no reason.
Yeah.
I think the craziest programming thing is that one guy who like built like his own operating system or something, like Harry Davis, I think.
Yeah.
That's wild.
Yeah. By the way, there's a very, very small programming language which has the smallest compiler in the world. It's under a kilobyte. I can't say the name. Some of you already know what I'm going to say, what I'm going to write on the board.
Yeah.
So it's actually a very interesting language if you break it down. The programs are just written with like, I think 6 different symbols, but it actually is an implementation of a Turing machine where you're like, you have a pointer to memory and you're like moving the pointer around and like incrementing memory addresses, and like the whole program is written in just that, and to do like hello world takes like a very long time. But that's also a very interesting language. The compiler is under a kilobyte. I think it's like 860 bytes for the compiler. But anyway, enough silliness. I shall decree no more silliness in my classroom. How long do you think I'll be able to hold myself to that?
5 minutes.
Not even.
By the next week.
So, Python for loops aren't actually for loops standardly defined. They are actually for each loops. It's using a stupid name for an operation that's actually a different operation. Therefore, Python for loops are cursed. Even if people find them convenient, it's only because they're accidentally being forced to use a for each loop, which is actually, for each loops are actually very good and convenient. All right, now Java. Does anybody remember what a for each loop is called in Java? What's this thing in Java? What's that called? What's the Java terminology? Oh, come now, you didn't forget that much over the summer? That's it! The enhanced for loop. So, let me ask you a question. What is the nature of the enhancement? Well, I mean, it does something different, but like, it's like taking the for loop and calling it a super for loop 64. It doesn't actually say anything about what the difference is, right? To call it an enhanced for loop is to say, ooh, it's a special for loop. It's like, tell me what's special about it. Yes. Yeah, it's just a for each loop. But like, we already had a word for a for each loop, you know? Probably the most cursed for each loop is the one in JavaScript.
It's always JavaScript.
Yeah, because it's a method. First of all, for each is a method, and it requires you to write a lambda expression, right? So, yeah, JavaScript, most cursed for each loops. PHP, just for each. It is, was it what it says it is. Roughly the same type of syntax as the Java for each, which, you know, as cursed for each loops go, it's the least cursed of these three. But basically, notice how in Java it's int x in the list. Here it's list as item. So basically just take the two things, invert the position, use the correct verb, and you have yourself a for each loop. Relatively straightforward. Any questions? Good. Yeah, that's about it. Any questions about this topic before we move on to the next topic? Okay. So, I'm not going to talk about how PHP is cursed anymore. That bit is now finished. So, let us consider web applications in their totality, right? When we write a web application, we can draw an analogy back to our model versus view distinction that you folks had pounded into your brain in Java, right? Anybody care to remind me what the model and the view are? Yes?
The model is where we program our classes, and the view is where the user interacts with the interface.
Yes. So the model, roughly speaking, contains the logic, right? The business end of the program. the stuff where all of the if statements and loops and stuff are happening. The view in Java is where you do your console interaction, or you hook it up to JavaFX, something like that. That distinction between view and model roughly correspond to the difference between front end and back end in a web application. The client side of everything is the view. The PHP side of everything is the model. Now, our models in this class are probably not going to be as complicated as they were in Java. That's fine. For one thing, PHP doesn't really like object-oriented anything, so, we're not going to have any UML diagrams or anything, fortunately for some. Including me, who has to grade them. So, the question then becomes, when you are writing a view, or you are writing the front end, how does the view get the back end or the model to perform actions? How was this done in Java? Anybody? How does the view get the model to do something in Java?
User input.
User input? Not quite what I'm thinking about. The user will give input, and then the view decides what subroutines of the model should activate based on the user input, but how does it actually get the model to do something? Yes?
Through different classes or implementation, inheritance and
See, inheritance is like how the model is structured in and of itself. I'm looking for something simpler. Something even from like week 3 or 4 of Java. Yes? So, creating objects, okay, but once you have the object, how do you get it to do something? Methods! Very good. When the model, or when the view is trying to get the model to do something, it calls a method of an object, which it has instantiated. That's the Java approach. The web application approach now. When the client wants the server to give it some information, what does it do? Ajax, but what is Ajax doing?
Sending the request.
Sending a request for what?
The PHP file.
Or a file in general, right? All requests are requests for a resource, right? Think about it this way. Can you write a request without specifying a file to request? No, not yet anyway. Once we start getting into RESTful APIs, you will see that that's where that distinction starts breaking down. But in sort of web classic terms, anytime you are performing a request, you are requesting something. That something is a file. So, when the client wishes to perform different functions, it therefore follows that it will be requesting different files. A web application may be composed of many PHP files. It is a bad way to organize a web application to have all requests route to the same PHP file unless you're using some kind of more advanced framework. Some frameworks, like when you're doing RESTful stuff, everything will sort of be routed by one central routing infrastructure, and then you call in each of the individual things. But in web classic terms, it's a bad way to organize a web classic application to have everything, all functions be determined by one PHP file when you can split that up into multiple files. So, long story short, PHP is organized at the level of files rather than at the level of functions. That is how the front end communicates with it. Does that make sense? This also makes sense if you consider input and output. When you are requesting an operation on the server, what is the input?
Files that you're getting.
No, those are that's the files that you're getting, that's like the source code, right? To draw the analogy with Java, that's like what's been written inside of the method. I'm asking what is the analogy in a web application to the parameters that you pass into a method in Java? Where are the parameters located?
In the class.
In web. When we are executing a PHP script, where are the inputs located? Originally.
On the page.
Not on the page. Think about server communication. How is the server communicated with in the first place? Through routing. Well, we don't have to worry about the network infrastructure. Yes? In the packet. Yes, thank you very much. So in the incoming request packet, data will be attached to that in the form of parameters. Think about your GET request parameters, right? If you have, your standard construction, this.php question mark x is equal to 5 and y is equal to 10, etc. Right? Those parameters get attached to the outgoing packet, outgoing from the perspective of the client, incoming from the perspective of the server. So, the server receives these inputs. It knows which file to execute. It then does so. What does it produce as a result? What does the server produce as a result?
A response
A response,
packet.
yes, a response packet. So, particularly, the PHP is responsible for putting the payload together, although it can put other things on that as well. So, from the perspective of the server, the sort of client-server intercommunication, here's our little client, here's our little server, sends a request packet, server sends back a response packet, IPO. Right? Probably haven't seen IPO since Python.
You did some database actually.
Oh, did you?
Last week.
Oh, there you go. Okay. So yeah, IPO structure, that's how it breaks down for a web application, at least from the perspective of the server side. So, this is why, although you can write functions in PHP, those functions are not directly executed by the client. Right? So the question might be, why then might we want to write a function in PHP, since it supports them? If it's not a part of the API, what is the purpose of a function? Anybody? What is the purpose of a function?
To move things around.
What things?
In the program, the processing parts.
So statements? At the back?
Reusability,
Say again?
to reuse it.
Reusability, that's one of the purposes of the function, yes. So, yes,
I was gonna say to issue a list of commands.
to issue a list of commands, yes. Anybody else? What's the purpose of a function? Yes?
To issue a list of our commands, what, how do I come up with that, from our methods?
Yes, well, function and method I'm here using interchangeably.
Oh, okay.
Because really there's, like, a function is a method, just, you know, is your language being pedantic about it, basically. So, all of you are on a journey of developing your programming skills. You can't, like, you're starting to get to the point where you can't just, you know, what's the term that's used for it? Playing the novice, something like that, playing the fool. There's going to swiftly come a point with all of the people who are in this room where you can no longer pretend to be someone who just picked up programming, right? You folks have been doing this for a year now, right?
Yeah.
So it's about time you started consciously trying to think like programmers. So one of the things that programmers do is they abstract and they modularize. Functions are your basic tool for abstraction and modularization. As you gain experience as a programmer, your threshold for this will go down and down and down. So you might be programming along, working on your work, and you may say to yourself, oh, I have used this block of code like 6 times. Maybe I should write a function for that. Right? And yes, you should. As soon as you start, like, as soon as it pops into your head that you should use functions that weren't specifically asked of you in the assignment, that's the type of thing that you need to think about, right? It's the same, it's like the same type of thing where if you are writing a long list of variables and you're numbering them, you know, variable 1, variable 2, variable 3, variable 4, you should be using an array. You should just be using an array, right? This is the same thing. If you highlight a section of code and you hit Control-C, I mean your own code here, folks. Before you hit Control-V, this is what I want each of you to do. Put in a function, Control-V it in there, close the function, and then replace where you copied it from with the function. Because anytime you're copying and pasting your code from place to place to place to place inside of your program, you could be doing it more efficiently. Each time you paste something in, you are introducing another site where if you have to change something, you have to change it there too. Whenever you want to change something, you should only change it in one place. If it's in a function, it's only in one place. So, again, as you gain experience, that threshold will decrease. It's like, oh, I've used these 5 lines, or these 10 lines, or these 300 lines, like 6 times. Maybe I should write a function. 2 years later, I've used these 4 lines like 4 times. Maybe I should write a function. 2 years later, I've used these 80 lines twice. I should probably write a function. 2 years later, you know what? I feel like this code might be useful later somewhere else, so I'm going to put it in a function before I know I need to use it. And that's when you have transcended. That is when you have reached programmer nirvana. So functions are still good. Please still use functions. All right? Don't kill yourself over them, because it takes time to work your way into this way of thinking about things. Alright? I am not expecting perfection, but I am expecting improvement. So, good. Any questions about any of that? So, I'd like to give a demonstration of what I'm talking about here with different PHP files that do different, these different functions of a web application. This is a little something that I wrote for JavaScript the one time I taught it. You folks can follow along too if you go to the following address: csu.mohawkcollege.ca/tilde/w2023/Ajax examples, Ajax_examples, example 6. There you go. Right there. Honor system tic-tac-toe. Why is it honor system? Because anybody can play anyone at any time. So all this thing is really doing is it's receiving requests to place an X or an O somewhere in the grid, and then doing that if that portion of the grid is unoccupied. It's not implementing any additional rules. It's not checking anything else. That's all it's doing. So let's take a look at the requests that this page is making. It doesn't even tell you when it's won, when someone's won. And anybody can reset the game at any time. So you might be saying to yourself, this is a really bad implementation of tic-tac-toe. And I agree with you. So, what's interesting is what's going on with the PHP scripts. So this game has 3 PHP scripts which do everything, right? The first one is GameState.php. This is simply requesting the game state from the server. This executes every half second. That's why this thing is kept up to date. That's how this thing is kept up to date. Remember that the server cannot reach out and force data into your clients, right? The clients must update themselves. If I were to set in the JavaScript console, if I was to disable the set interval, which is being called every half second to perform this Ajax call, this thing would no longer receive updates. It would be out of date. And if I were to send moves, those moves wouldn't necessarily be accepted because I didn't have an accurate view of the game, so I don't know which squares are X's and which squares are O's, right? So that's GameState.php. The data here is being stored in a CSV file. All this thing does is read the CSV file, JSON encode it, and kick it out to the client. What's also interesting, is right there. Oh, come on.
Right there, okay.
Send move. SendMove.php is a script that is invoked every time somebody clicks on one of those squares. The server handles a send move request. I'm not going to get into the contents of these files because we don't have time, unfortunately. Ask me again when we start talking about file I/O, right? But essentially what it's doing, send move, it reads in the state in that file, makes a modification if a modification is needed, and then it writes it back into the file and echoes that JSON back again here. And that's all it does. Finally, we have the reset. There it is, reset.php. All this does is it writes a string containing all blank values into the file, overwriting what was there before. Once reset is hit, anybody who polls the game gets the blank game, unless somebody managed to sneak in a send move request after you put the reset request in. Because basically what happens is, like, all of the people in the room who are sending requests to the server, or were a few minutes ago, because now everybody's bored with this, all of those requests that were sent into the server all get put into a big queue and are executed in the order that they are received, right? So this leads to interesting conditions where, okay, that's a lot of requests, that's good. This leads to interesting conditions where, like, you might be making modifications that are illegal in what you see as the board state, but somebody could have reset it while you were, between your finger clicking that button and that arriving at the server. The game could have been reset, which has interesting effects on state. Ooh, that was good. That's okay. So the undefined, right? That was cool. That was good. I have a theory about why that happens. It's like the server is processing one request, has the file open in one, servicing one packet, then another packet opens the same file, they make a conflicting write to the same file, it does something weird to the file, destroys the contents for a brief second, and that's why you get undefined very briefly for a half second. So, yeah. Good. So, let's talk about another web application as a bit of a case study. I know you guys are having fun, but I'm going to turn it off now. By the way, this is not the end of class, I just want the whiteboard. You'll know when it's the end of class because I will say it is the end of class. So about 10 years ago or so, there was a game on the internet which had a fair amount of popularity. It was a bit of a cultural phenomenon at the time and actually spawned an interesting little subgenre of games that are similar to it, which have this kind of massively multiplayer kind of feel to them, but they are, in essence, very, very simple games. Does anybody know what game I'm talking about? Yeah? Not Club Penguin. No, I am in Club Penguin, but I mean Tux the Linux Penguin. And no, it's not Final Fantasy.
RuneScape?
Not RuneScape.
Wow. It's a browser game, isn't it?
It is a browser game.
Good job.
The one that came before that one. Because that, yeah, that's it.
Agario?
Agario.
Like,
There we go. Agar.io.
Oh, man.
So if you weren't aware of this before, the reason that it's called agar.io is because when you grow bacteria in a petri dish, you put like a little protein substrate, nutrition substrate in it called agar, and that's what the bacteria grow on. So that's why it's called agario, because it's like little amoebas that are eating each other. So to describe the game, sort of, I'm going to do a simplified version of the game, right? In this game, you have a series of blobs, right? The purpose of the game, each player who's logged into the game is controlling one of these blobs, right? The purpose of the game is to be the biggest, baddest blob on the street. And the way that you achieve that is by eating things that are smaller than you. You eat things that are smaller than you. There are little pieces of food strewn about the field of play, and that's basically most of it. Unless, like, there are other mechanics that are in there as well to make it a little more interesting. The other thing is that your velocity is somehow proportional to the inverse of your size. And that's like most of the game explained right there, right? So, if we take this simplified view of this game, right? The state which is expressible here, another way to put it, the amount of information that has to be stored in the server to represent the state of a game like this is very simple, actually. All you require, if you wanted to do this in an SQL database, you could do it in an SQL database. If you wanted to do it as a list of objects or a list of associative arrays, you could do it that way as well. That's a more like JSON feeling way to do it. But essentially, it's like, you have a player ID, right? You have X position, you have Y position, you have size, and I think you could like select your color as well. And that's really it. You don't really need much more than that, right? One of these entries for every player in the game. If the game is underpopulated by human players, you can throw some bots in, And like, that's it. That's it. That's actually all that the game requires. So let's think about how the user interaction works here, right? So in this game, the way that the controls worked is that you have your blob in the middle of the screen, and you have a cursor, right? And it just kind of calculates the angle between your cursor and your blob, sends that to the server, calculates what your velocity should be, modifies your position according to that angle and that velocity, which is just a very small amount of trigonometry, right? Is there a clock in this room? That's going to be very interesting for testing.
2:45.
Is it 2:45? Thank you. So you can see how basically what this would not be that far off my GameState.php, right? All it would be, like the only difference is it would be like GameState.php, send it the parameter theta equals, 30 or whatever, and run that every half second or quarter second or however fast your internet connection will allow it to run, right? And that updates the state here. You then download the states of all of the all of the active players, right, as a JSON, there's some front-end business that renders them as circles, which, you know, everybody remembers from JavaFX. What do you need to define a circle? X, Y, and size, right? So with just this information, although this is like your relevant in-game information, it's also the exact information you need to draw the circle, right? And it's really not, it's like that, and it has to be able to tell you when you're dead and respawn you. And, oh, and it also has to keep track of like the positions of the little food bits. And that's it. I'm pretty sure that the way that that game worked is like when a food bit was like consumed, it would be like that would be another PHP script that you would call. When you consumed the food bit, I'm pretty sure it just popped it out of existence there and popped it into existence somewhere else. Like there was a fixed number of them, and they would, you know, be moved around the map. Rather than being eaten, they were just being teleported, type thing. But yeah, so again, these types of things break down very easily in terms of PHP files, right? Make sense? How many people are playing Agario on their computers right now? Yeah. It's still up, eh? It's still live? Yeah. Yeah? Well, probably mostly bots these days. Yeah. It's okay. Some people were very sneaky. I was never particularly into the game, but you know, there were people in my class playing it, so I was like, I wonder what this is all about. And people were very sneaky. People would like work in teams to get you.
Oh yeah.
You know? It's crazy. People are crazy, man. But anyway. Yeah, I think that's it for today. Thank you very much for your time and attention, folks. See you next week. Oh, I should mention, wait. I haven't talked about assignment 1 yet. So, if you haven't seen, assignment 1 has been released. You do not yet possess all of the information required to complete the assignment, as we have not talked about how to receive parameters from incoming requests. We will be talking about that in due course. You should be able to do the meaty part of the assignment and do all of the algorithmic stuff. Just hard code your values for now, and we'll throw in the inputs when we get there, okay? You've got 2 weeks to do the assignment, so this is a nice, relax. It is a deadline though.
Sir, I am a trophy hunter by heart. I want to know so I enjoy the challenge, but what was my ass? Knowing this